Awesome. Let's get things started here. So we have a new face on the call that I'm very excited to introduce. I'm Chantal, really quickly, Director of Marketing, and I'm thrilled to introduce Eric Roten, who is an account executive and an account manager who works with prospects and customers every single day. Eric, can you say some words?
Sure. Yeah. So excited to dive in here and talk about this. So I wouldn't say I'm an SEO expert by any means, but I talk to people every day dealing with these challenges of like scaling content and scaling SEO success. So I was kind of the inspiration for like identifying some of these 7 common blockers and have been involved in probably hundreds of troubleshooting and challenges to figure that out, like how to overcome these issues. And I think where I add the most value probably is helping get executives on board. That seems to be with all these issues that come up. Now, whether you know marketing or not, it's important to make sure your executives are on board or nothing's going to happen. That's often a blocker. So if any questions are coming up or issues with that today, I'd be happy to chime in and share some examples.
And then I'm not sure if we've ever like really fully introduced this about Grady, but he used to be on our success team working with customers before transitioning into sort of a all-purpose support role for both existing customers and also prospects. Grady, you want to say some words?
Yeah, love doing the webinars. Love just chatting with the crew about SEO. I've been doing SEO for a while, both in-house and in an agency kind of setting. So excited to kind of dive in here, share my own experience and expertise on some of the SEO details.
Fantastic. All right. So quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover why we think content production is so important for SEO success generally. And then we'll go through all of these blockers for creating content, which we see being the main blocker for being successful with SEO ultimately. So I'm going to read through these options because we actually have a poll. So basically the 7 blockers are keyword strategy, outlining, writing, editing, where to publish, what kind of page templates to use, and then the actual act of publishing. So I'm going to launch this poll. And if everyone could share any of the blockers that they're feeling today, even if it's just like, oh, there's a little bit of friction around who should be writing or how much time it takes to edit or anything like that. Please. Wow, we have 1 for each. Cool. So the results of this poll, we're going to sort of focus a little bit more intensively on that topic for the rest of the talk today. So excited to see what y'all are feeling. Wow, keyword strategy is really dominating right now as the main blocker. That's super helpful to know. We can focus extra on that. Cool. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with everyone so you can see. So keyword strategy, 8 out of 9, huge. And then everything else is 2 or 3 out of 9. So I think that's incredibly telling. And we can definitely spend some extra time there today. So firstly, content production equals SEO success. The reason that we think that, and we also see that sort of manifest itself in our customer base, is that if you think about SEO as sort of 3 different parts, there's infrastructure, content, and endorsements. Infrastructure is the technical SEO stuff that you've probably heard Grady talk about in the past. And this sort of thing can make or it can break your website, but it can't quite make it in the same way that content production can. So if your infrastructure is messed up, it can have a huge negative impact, but having really good infrastructure is not the thing that's going to get you onto page 1. Endorsements like backlinks and things like that are incredibly impactful. They're just really hard to scale. So, you can't just like get 1,000 backlinks in one day in a way that Google will approve of. But content is one of those things where you can publish an incredible amount of content. You can scale it really rapidly, and it also has a huge impact on your site's ability to rank in search. So what we see is basically that the more content is published, the higher amount of traffic and conversions you're going to get on your site. And then obviously there's lots of different kinds of content. So if everyone could answer in the chat how long it takes them to do each of these different kinds of content. So we have SEO performance content, we have thought leadership, like blog post short form, and then we have long form thought leadership, think ebook or something. And then we have video as well.
While people are chatting into about some of the timelines there,
Mhm.
some foundational information that might be helpful too for everybody is just like how Google operates, which might be a little bit basic, but I'm going to explain it anyway, just so everybody's on the same page. Google has crawlers, right? They have robots and spiders that read the entirety of the internet every day across every single website. So they come to your website and they have a designated set of time to then say, I need to render all this information. I need to understand what it is and then assign keyword value and relevance to the content that's then there. So plain and simple, bigger websites have more pages for the bots to crawl. There's more content for then Google to understand the contextual relevance of your domain, and then they perform just better, plain and simple. Now, the other thing that can affect that is then like endorsements, backlinks, and internal links. So then that way bots are constantly kind of coming back to your website. But to Chantal's excellently made point before, backlinks are really hard to then create at scale. And if you do them incorrectly, then you can get what's called de-indexed. Google can just wipe you out and not include you at all. There are some horror stories after the Google Penguin update where like Expedia was building backlinks like crazy. And then like Google found out, they did the update, they removed them for like several weeks and they almost tanked as a business. So the best way to then get to SEO results is just by producing content at scale. If you do SEO performance content, that's the best case scenario because then you're speaking Google's language back to it. But doing thought leadership is also great as well. So that's just the fastest, easiest, most cost-effective way to then get to those organic results that you're looking for.
Fantastic. And Jackie, thank you so much for the detailed overview. 2 to 9 months to produce SEO performance content and short form thought leadership, not really doing long form content. Wow. So does it take 2 to 9 months for a single piece of SEO performance content? Wow. That's really good to know.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Mhm. All good. Everyone's coming at it from a different angle. At Emmanuel, we're a little bit faster and looser. So
Yeah, and
Tass has a really good question for you, Jack. Reviews. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I was gonna see if I could share my screen here to give like a really powerful example of why this like high volume of content can be so helpful. And I'm guessing a lot of people here use SEMrush or Ahrefs. So I'm gonna use like one of our customers, Cast Iron, I think is one of the best examples of this. And I'm gonna share a little bit of their SEMrush data where they've just been consistently growing traffic and growing their keywords, where I think their biggest standout when I look at this data, and I'm looking at SEMrush reports every single day, but the biggest thing is they have 95% of their traffic is coming from non-branded keywords, which is what we're trying to capture when Grady's talking about that contextual relevance of all the different searches that are happening. And if you go to their sitemap, you'll see why. They have hundreds and hundreds of pages that are all about like really contextually relevant keywords to what they do. And this list just goes on. And this is what's allowing them to cast such a wide net to capture those keywords. And this is, what we're talking about today is like how to get to this point where you have all these different avenues for people to come into your website and capture that demand.
Yeah, this is like an incredibly powerful example, top of the line, like best of what we see, basically. They're really absolutely crushing it. And the results show. So this was the thing that people needed the most, or are feeling the most pain around. So I think we can spend a good chunk of our time today on this. Keyword strategy. What terms to start with? We see this a lot manifesting itself as like analysis paralysis in a way. I think it's like, wow, we don't know where to begin. And that does genuinely hold people back from like just starting and producing content. What have you both seen around this?
Yeah, and particularly prior to now with like AI content, it obviously was a big lift. And, for some people still is, like obviously 2 to 9 months to get content produced. That's a long time. So it's like, okay, like if I'm going to maximize my effort, like I got to know that the piece of content is going to drive quality traffic, is going to have an impact on my goals. Yeah, it's something that I can win, is like contextually relevant for the domain and will help the whole website overall. So just like starting from that foundation is super critical. But what we typically find too is that a lot of like, be it agencies, freelancers, or sometimes people in house, they kind of really lean on some other data points that we don't necessarily focus on too much. Um, Search volume being the first one. Um, in general, people want to go after kind of like the broader terms, some like an industry category that then is just like the perfect spot for your own website. But that means that if it's higher volume, it might not be as higher intent. It might be really high competition. Everybody in your field is going to be competing for that. And so in most instances, it's going to be better to then break that down into subtopics within a cluster. Demandwell, for example, right? Chantal produces this content all the time where it's like, well, what is under the umbrella of SEO? It's what we talk about today: content production, digital strategy, keyword research, technical SEO, Google algorithm updates. By then producing that content systematically, you will then naturally incorporate some of those broader terms that then will help you like march towards that ultimate objective of then ranking for that information. But then you stand a better chance to then pull traffic directly for those kind of like longer tail, more niche terms in general. That also really helps Google from a contextual standpoint, because clearly just producing page after page for us of just saying SEO, 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 it's going to have like diminishing returns. But if we can produce that content and show that we are subject matter experts for Google algorithm updates and technical SEO, all those other subtopics, then we show that we are authoritative of the umbrella of the general cluster itself.
Yeah.
So
So
typically,
you just made, oh, sorry, I was just going to summarize, but continue.
no, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think the 3 points that you just made are incredibly important. And I just want to make sure that we like restate them. One is, it feels like there's like a very precious feeling about deciding to go after a keyword where you have to invest a ton of time and you want it to be right. And you have to pay people to write it sometimes. I mean, not so much anymore with generative AI. But it feels like it's this like huge decision. So that's one part. The second part is there's friction around the relationship between intent and volume. So like high intent keywords often have low search volume. So it can be hard to choose that one as the one that you're going to put all this energy into, because you're like, oh, but it's only 20 searches a month. Like, and that's super normal in B2B SaaS, especially. And then the sort of third thing is topic themes and balancing intent and volume are kind of the solution, I think, that we're talking about to finding the right balance, basically. And making sure that you're going after the right terms that your audience is searching for, that will help your website, and that has a balance of search volume and level of buying intent.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it too.
Eric, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, you all said it well, and I think the one bullet I mentioned in here was directive from executives, and
Yeah,
came up in the chat a little bit too, where like was it Taz or who was it? Jackie mentioned like having so many people need to approve this, and that can be honestly the biggest challenge I've seen is like you have this executive that's far removed and they want to like own a specific category that could be super competitive. So maybe it's like I'll use like another customer example. I guess I'm debating on if I can share, but I'll just be vague with it. So I have a customer that was essentially going after like a category that was super competitive, and they wanted this like category keyword that was not necessarily showing intent for somebody wanting to buy their services or their software, but their executive team was just like, we need to own that category. We need to be first. And they focused so much on that they missed all these lower funnel opportunities, like insert category software, or how do I improve category, or some of these other keywords, which I think we'll dive more into on the next slide. But then there's this one I can give, like, for sure, I know I can explain this one, but we have this customer pillar HR, and they were going after interview intelligence as their category. And that's what they all really care a lot about. And that's an awesome, keyword, but it's not very high intent. If somebody search for interview intelligence, they may not be looking to buy a software solution. And they were actually for a while ranking in the top 3 for interview intelligence, but then LinkedIn started writing about it, and LinkedIn's domain authority is just way bigger. And, the intent of that top of funnel keyword is different, but they're still, so they transitioned a little bit and are able to own interview intelligence software. So they're ranking number 1 for that still. And it's finding those kind of lower funnel, lower search volume keywords that the traffic is going to convert. And then once you've capitalized on those, you can start to expand to other ones, which actually might be a really good transition into the next slide here.
Well, I want to spend a little bit more time on one thing that you were talking about, and I'm super curious to hear in the chat if people are experiencing this, but my read is that there's a big difference also between companies where some leader, be it, I know sometimes CEOs have opinions about this, sometimes it's the marketing leader, has an opinion and really wants to rank for a certain thing. Like, that level of direction, while sometimes misguided, can be really helpful, because then you're like, great, I can create pages for this category term, and I can do like really similar ones because I know that that's what you want. But then what happens when there isn't direction coming from a leader on the marketing team or generally at the company? Have either of you seen that play out?
Oh yeah, all the time. I'm sure Eric sees this regularly too, as well, with your clients right now. And it's common too, particularly for like kind of earlier stage companies, to basically just know the product and what you offer, but then not necessarily to think through more definitively, like, who is the predefined audience, what are their pain points that then might lead them to needing a solution like ours, and then correlating kind of keywords and your strategy to that, like, kind of purchase funnel. So that's a great place to start too. We do this a lot with our, like, kind of kickoff process, to basically ask yourself, what are the common traits of our buyers? What are the titles that then they have? What do they originate from? What then is the main hurdle that they're trying to get over within their own role specifically that would lead them to trying to explore us? And then what keywords and keyword groups can we just like naturally fit into that process, and then produce content to then fulfill that need?
I like to think about this as sort of, if you take the most sort of general marketing principles of which apply to every single thing in marketing, paid ads, whatever, email, all of it, cold outbound, it's like, who's the audience? What are their pain points? What solutions do you have that like are medicine for those pains? And like, your SEO strategy is no different. It's basically identifying how people are expressing those pains and what they're searching for to indicate those pains. And then all you have to do is just like show up when they do that. And so, you have the funnel to work with. You have top of funnel terms, mid funnel terms, bottom of funnel terms. You have different audience types. Are they searching for those things in different ways? And then you have different features that you can talk about for each thing. So think of it as like a landing page that fits into each of those personas if you have a matrix. That's how I kind of conceptualize it for myself on its most fundamental and basic level.
100% agree.
Curious to hear in the chat if you have any blockers with keyword strategy. Is it like finding the keywords? Is it like prioritizing which ones to go after? Or what's stopping you from finding the right keywords right now? Is it just can't find them? Or is it something else that's getting in the way there?
Such a good question. while we're waiting for people to chat in, I mean, within our customer base, we definitely see it. I mean, if they're a customer of demand well, they have a list of keywords that are that meet the funnel, meet the audience, all the things. And when we see people have this challenge, it's like a I can't decide kind of challenge, right?
In some instances, yes.
Mhm.
And sometimes too, we get people that think that it should be, a specific audience, a specific phase of the funnel, or a specific keyword group. But then in our onboarding process as well, it's then determined like, oh, we actually need to then focus in this direction actually instead. Um, there are other instances too where sometimes people are just kind of so focused on hitting those broader category terms that they haven't necessarily unpacked what that funnel is. And then there are some people too that are in blossoming industries that they don't even know if there is a category, period. And so a lot of the demand well process is geared towards one, trying to be your partner to then understand, like, let's dive into this together to then understand what those pain points are, who your audience is, and then as your SEO expert, how can we correlate that to keywords? But then we do this sort of process as well, which then says, let's invent our own keyword list, and then let's cross-reference and validate to then see what in that invented list that we agree upon to be true is actually real and has search volume, and then using that as our foundational starting point for keyword research and finding all of the actual opportunities.
We have a great note in the chat. Prioritization has been difficult. It's a conflict internally if you pick a few easy to grab keywords or go broad. Yeah, it's super interesting. I also think if there's like many people making the decision, that makes it so much harder than if you have super clear directive from either like you've been given ownership to make these decisions or some leader has made it for you.
Yeah, actually, I know Shanna. Hey, Shanna. We've had some conversations. And the prioritization thing is always like the biggest issue because no matter what category, there's thousands of keywords you could go after. But the way I've seen this work well is trying to appease the other departments and the other like people that care and that are like, talking about this or even arguing about this issue. One of the companies that I've seen do this extremely well was Jellyfish is a customer of ours that they have like their product marketing team and their content marketing team really collaborated in depth with their sales team and their product team to understand what they call like a value framework, which breaks down all their issues across like their product offering and what they're hearing from sales of like where they can add value. And then basically looked at all the keywords there to see what they're ranking for today and then filling in those gaps. So wherever the highest margin product is in that gap is a good way to think about it, or what you're just getting asked about the most, again, internally to appease some of those other people to get some momentum. Because the biggest thing is like you just need to get started and like get going. And once you start seeing some results, you get some happy internal people that are seeing what they're asking for, you can start to expand and grow that more. And I'm getting excited for this next slide. Chantal, can we jump into that next one?
Totally.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Do you want to talk through it?
Sure. Yeah. And so this is like something our CEO has explained a few times, and there's this search volume and intent, and everybody wants the most intent, the lower funnel keywords that have the most search volume. But the reality is those do not exist. There's not enough people in the world that are searching for like, your specific solution that are like that low in the funnel. So
I will piggyback off of that there, Eric. Like there are, but it's such subdivided into like variants of like types of queries. And so there's no like penultimate, just like one thing that is just like high volume and high intent. It's broken down into hundreds, if not thousands of smaller queries that's like individual to me. Because I might ask a question. I might say, what is the best SEO software for B2B marketers? But Eric, you might just type it in and just go B2B software pricing. And so you can't just necessarily pinpoint and say, we're going to do this one specifically. You have to find all of those higher intent, lower volume type keywords, and then systematically go after those as a group.
And the flip side is if something is incredibly high search volume, there might be some high intent people in there, but it's going to be mostly super high funnel, generic. It could be literally anyone in the world, like any random person on the street could be searching for. They'd be like, oh, I heard my granddaughter talking about SEO because she works in SEO. Let me give that a Google. It's like that person is not going to convert on your website. Even though they're one of the 20,000 people a month that search that thing,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, continue, Eric.
Well said, both of you. And when we get into prioritization too, this kind of demonstrates like what's closest to the money, I think, is the way to think about that. Because you may have this really low search volume where I'll use Shanna's example, SecFi. Like if someone is searching, how do I buy SecFi, or how much does it cost to, work with SecFi, or that, whatever their category. You may only have 10 searches a month for that, or even less, but that person is ready to buy. So you better be there. You better show up for that. Whereas, some of the higher volumes, like what is, financial consulting, or what is financial advising, that person like could be the grandma example that Chantal mentioned, like, oh, my grandson does financial advising. What's that? And that's not somebody you really need to capture. So that's a good way to think about that prioritization.
And higher volume is just naturally more competitive. Were you going to jump in there, Chantal?
Go ahead.
So it's going to be harder to win. If CRM software, we're dealing with competing against the 800-pound gorillas of, Salesforce and Zoho and Microsoft of the world. So then finding those other opportunities that are higher intent, they're better for your goals and they're easier to then win. And Demandwell approaches prioritization. We actually have this in our platform where we then showcase this for our keyword coach, what we call it. It both takes in like quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics to then ensure that then our users have the ability to then say these groups and these keywords, these terms are more important for our audience specifically, but that's not the only thing that then you want to hang your hat on. We also have like our own algorithmic approach to then say, what's some math that we should apply to it to then quantitatively determine of that group that you've identified, which ones should we be going after? Should have the highest impression share, have the lowest competition, the best mix of search volume that we should be going after where those gaps actually are. So that's how we typically coach our users through producing performance content to then target specific keywords.
I just had a brain blast moment, thing I've never thought before that maybe someone else has thought before. But if you think about volume and the conversion potential of the person who has landed on your page after searching that, like, I think it becomes incredibly clear which is more important actually. So, and maybe that's a good way to like explain this to executives, where basically if someone searches SEO solution for B2B SaaS, that person could be a customer of Demandwell's every single time. So even if it's only 10 people searching a month, like if those 10 people land on our site from those search terms, I want to get 10 opportunities out of that every single month. If it's SEO, say it's 1,000 searches a month and only one of them is like the right person, then that goes from 10 opportunities a month, 1 opportunity a month. Like, seems like, I don't know how it would work out for different industries, but that's why intent is so important,
And it can change because there are people that want the volume because the purpose is to then fuel advertising dollars for that traffic. But in most like B2B instances, like you're trying to go after a qualified prospect that is like your target audience. So that's typically why we like to start off with that onboarding process, right? To then understand like, well, where are we? What's your specific instance? How long is that purchase funnel? How detailed is it? How can we subdivide it? And then go from there.
I also want to share with folks who are listening that we did a whole SG Weekly on keyword strategy recently, and I can share a link with those who are interested to the video recording because we went super deep into that. And we have a fun chat from Eric Rowan. Do you want to talk through that?
I was just like a little math on what you were explaining, Chantal. Just if we can convert those really high, there's only 10 searches a month. You convert 5 of those into a sales opportunity. That's way better than if there's 1,000 searches a month and you're getting 3% of that, which is like a fraction of an opportunity every month. And yeah, I don't know if those numbers are accurate for everybody, but those are things you could look at too to help you prioritize which one of these are super relevant versus which is kind of vague or not so specific to what we do.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks. Does anyone listening have any other additional questions on keyword strategy before we shift into the other blockers that we see? We can just go back to kind of the main list real quick while we wait for the chats to roll in. So not sure which terms to start with. Oh, haven't used a keyword strategy in the past. We haven't talked about this at all. If people are just unfamiliar with creating content based on a keyword strategy, which is actually so common, I feel, in B2B marketing specifically, like it can be very product oriented or thought leadership oriented, where the marketing team is either really just trying to like create content, not necessarily with SEO in mind, to educate people who are visiting their site about their product and about their features and all those things. Or they're trying to write blog posts that explain their point of view in their brand voice. It's much more of sort of a brand tactic. Have either of you seen that play out?
Absolutely. So many times. And it's not incorrect. It's not a bad place to start either, Chantal. Like a lot of people just like natively want to create like a website that then is like kind of a digital brochure, which is like an explainer of what you do, who you are, what you provide. But if we're talking about like maximizing your content production to get more organic results, then you kind of need to think about like SEO and like as a practice, not necessarily as a channel. So then that way, as you produce more content, yes, it could have a purpose for branding or sales enablement or email marketing, whatever it might be. But if you produce that also with SEO best practices, then when it goes live, it also stands a great chance of just pulling that evergreen passive traffic at the same time. So at least doing that from the bare minimum is excellent. But then once you move past that digital brochure phase, then doing what we talk about, which is like, let's think about our audience. Let's think about who we want to then come into the website and then adhere that keyword strategy, create that ourselves, and then produce content in that way. That's a great next step. And a lot of people, you know, you're all brilliant marketers in your own right. You know your audience and your products and your services very well. You can probably just do this out of logic. A lot of people do. And just say, these are the things that I know to be true under my own topic category. Let's kind of go down that perspective and then get into, you know, Google Ads, SEMrush, whatever it is, and start looking up some of those opportunities for keywords and roll that into your content strategy.
I think you make a great point that like marketers generally know what their audience cares about. And even if you're just creating a blog based on that, or if you're just creating a blog where you're talking about your features and you're getting your brand message out there, like that's not going to be for nothing. That definitely makes a difference. And I think like one thing that's coming to mind for me is that SaaStr from the beginning has taken a very thought leadership oriented approach to their content marketing, and it has paid off for SEO for them because they have just created so much thought leadership content. And in the end, it kind of works out. And I think like the reason it works out is that they've hit an insane volume threshold that most people who are just blogging don't hit. So I think that's the big difference. And people who really focus on SEO they might end up hitting a higher volume threshold also, because they're more just like, I'm a machine banging it out, you know? But yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about.
And thought leadership
Definitely.
is weird too in general, because obviously everybody wants to produce like the best content possible that's going to go viral, that really resonates with your audience. But
Mhm.
in order to do that, right, it takes a lot of time to come up with a gangbusters idea. Like you have to like truly research that to then understand, put in a lot of effort and work to then make that happen. Um, and so to do that at scale is really difficult. It's really, really hard. But if you do need to then still get traffic and goals and objectives, then it's great to then just balance it. Just come by it honestly and say, look, there are different types of content. Thought leadership, branded content, high navigational pages, that's important. We got to have that. That should be its own sphere that then we put through the lens of SEO to make sure that it maintains and does what it needs to. But then there should be a whole other wing as well that's geared towards hitting that objective of what you're talking about, Chantal, like scaling that content, ranking for given keywords, adding contextual relevance to the domain. So you can pull the right people onto the website to then engage with all of that wonderful content that you spent your hard-earned time creating.
Mhm. We're going to have to kind of power through these next ones because we have 20 minutes left. Definitely chime in with questions if you have them as we're going through. So once you've decided what keyword to focus on, the next step is creating the outline or the brief so that whoever is writing can knows what they're supposed to say and what keywords to include and all that good stuff and how many words. So not having someone dedicated on staff to do the outlining, I think, is a huge issue that we see a lot. And it can be any of these options which we have on the screen. It could be a demand gen person, could be content marketer, could be SEO expert at your company if you're lucky enough to have one of those, could be a strictly copywriter type of job function, could be marketing leader, could be product team, to your point about jellyfish earlier, Eric. But the biggest issue that we see is like when that's not clear, like when there's not someone whose job it is to do this kind of work.
Yeah, and we usually see too, like if you're a big enough organization, you have your own content team, they typically set the content production calendar. And then they're like, great, we've done this. Now I need for you to SEO it. Which is really difficult. That's the tail wagging the dog. And it's really hard to go about making sure that it meets those objectives. And so best case scenario is to admit with the content team that's like, this isn't just a practice in creating art online. Your copywriting has the intention of then engaging with our audience and meeting our business objectives. Ergo, you need to produce this with intention. And there it needs to be like with SEO in mind from the very beginning and meeting that audience's funnel. And so just admitting that as well and having that kind of open line of communication, then it enables for someone who's more strategic at the beginning to then say, this is where we should start. This is how we should produce this outline. Do you agree, content team? Yes. Okay, here's some standards that then would be great for you to adhere to. Please produce it in this way. So then that way it does stand the best chance to perform once it actually goes live. It's really
100%.
hard to go backwards from that, you know?
Yeah. I love a few things of what you just said. One, that you used the word ergo in a sentence, like so flawlessly. I think that might be a first for us on SG Weekly. Fantastic. Secondly, like, yeah, there needs to be enough direction and structure on the team itself to say, like, we know who's creating this content and why. And by the way, let's also align with like all of the moving parts on this team to make sure that everyone's needs are met. And additionally, yeah, you can't like write a blog post and then retroactively optimize it for SEO. That's a disaster, a losing game. It doesn't really work. And I want to jump over to, we're going to skip this. I want to jump over to, I actually want to talk about editing next because of something that you mentioned, Grady, which is you need to know like why you're creating the content in the first place. And I think it's super related to what you were describing, the dynamic between the content marketing folks and the strictly SEO performance copy folks of like, what's the purpose of this? And let's be really clear on that from the very beginning, because if we are, everything else will be easier. Do either of you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I would love to. And
Mhm.
I thought the same thing with what Grady was saying about the purpose of the content, and ties in with outlining and editing and writing and who's doing all of that. Because if you're not aligned on the purpose of this content, that's going to be your biggest issue, because there's what, we could consider like thought leadership content. And I believe it was Jackie earlier that was talking about takes 2 to 9 months to create that. And that may be fine if it's thought leadership, if it's like something that is going to really provoke a new way of thinking, if that's going to be front and center on your blog or on your webpage, or if it's a really good asset that's used by all the salespeople that they're sending to every prospect, that is a unique perspective. And also, that may not be part of the volume of content conversation. Maybe you only need 5 of those throughout the whole year or forever. You only need just 5 heavy hitting, insightful, game-changing pieces of content. When we're talking about SEO content, that has a totally different strategy, because all you're trying to do is provide information to what someone's searching for. So when that's the case, you really shouldn't be too as concerned, at least, about, having this be thought-provoking and game-changing. They are literally looking for information to answer a question. And so you can weave in some of these really heavy-hitting like thought leadership pieces, or even case studies, or those types of things into your performance content. But the SEO performance content should read like an encyclopedia. That's why you see Wikipedia, for example, showing up for almost everything you search, because they're just providing unbiased information like an encyclopedia would, just giving you an answer to your query. And so, yeah, aligning on what the purpose of that is so important. And this will dovetail into where you keep this information on your site too, which definitely want to make sure we get to that today.
Yeah, let's go to that next. I think, like, just to summarize, if a piece is going to be ghostwritten for your CEO and it's going to be broadcasted across every channel that you have and blah, 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 like, edit the crap out of that. Let editing be a bottleneck for that piece of content. If it's going to be SEO performance content that, you're concerned that it's not to your brand voice standards or something like that, like, that's a thing that we believe is an unnecessary bottleneck, basically, because of our philosophy on SEO and our understanding of why volume is so important. And where to publish is obviously, go ahead, Grady.
Well, back to that intent thing that you brought up, Eric, and you just touched on, Chantal, right? Like, if the purpose is to draw traffic, like, then the brand is a component to this page going live in this content. It shouldn't be the penultimate thing, because in order for it to go live and pull traffic, it's competitive by nature. Google has to then determine quantifiably who is the most relevant for a singular keyword. And typically that comes down to how well you can speak Google's language back to it. So if all you do is answer in very concise words the query in question, then that's less information for Google to then say, this is more contextually relevant than something that has a wealth of information about it. And so if your intention is to then rank and pull traffic, then editing can actually do you a disservice if you do it in the correct way, or the incorrect way, excuse me. So just think about that as you go through this process as well. And hopefully that can kind of get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's just a different game. Eric, can you talk through these creative solutions that people have developed as places to house their SEO performance content?
Yeah, I would say this is probably like the biggest aha moment I get in conversations. I actually think a visual could be really helpful here. Can I share my screen on some of these? So I'll show those links in real life that were on that slide. But I'll start with Demandwell's example and try to tie this back into like the purpose of the content. So on Demandwell's site, this is our homepage, and this is where we want to draw people to. We also have our solutions pages, our resources, our blog, FAQ, And if you were to go to our blog, it literally says here, our experts share their insights on hot topics in the industry. So this is people like Chantal and Grady and our CEO and CTO sharing all of this expert opinion. And some of these take months to come up with. And really what's interesting to me about this is, as an SEO company, we're creating blogs that we're not thinking about SEO when we create these. This is not here to, rank well for a particular keyword. It's simply to share thoughtful information that can be helpful based on what we're hearing from the market. But if you go to our sitemap, usually no human goes to this unless they're an SEO nerd, like maybe some of you here, but there's hundreds and hundreds of pages that are targeted at specific keywords. And this is an approach that we take and a lot of our customers take to showing that contextual relevance that Grady keeps mentioning. So all of these are related to what we do and have a unique page that's relevant to all of that. But the only way you're going to find these pages is if you're actually Googling something relevant. So I pulled up one example here, marketing optimization software. So high intent keyword that we're ranking well for. So after you get through some of the ads and sponsorship, we're number one ranking here. And what this will do is, again, you're not going to find this easily unless you just search for that or something similar that this is ranking well for. And the immediate thing here is a call to action to get into a demo. And you have the option to go and, go to some of our main navigation pages and read a little bit more. But as you go more towards the bottom of the page is where we have this really rich encyclopedia style information about marketing tools and other digital marketing tools, online marketing tools that people may be searching for. So this is one way that we've been able to really scale out the content without taking up too much blog real estate or our FAQs that are going to be really important to draw people towards. Give some other examples too, because this is, not everybody follows that exact strategy, but can be really helpful to, look at. But another really good example is Seismic. One of our customers, they have this specific section of their website that they call enablement explainers. So if you go to their resources page, they have the blog, they have all these other ways to click through. And but in enablement explainers is where they keep their SEO focused content, more again, that encyclopedia type of information. And there are probably thousands of pages in this section. They're a much larger company than us and probably most of you on the call. But again, if you search for something like sales content analytics, which is one of their keywords that's super important to them, they're even paying for it, so important. But get past some of the ads and they are ranking highly on that. And again, the only way they're going to find that is if you search for that specific term and it starts to draw traffic. And there's a lot of other ways to go about this, but this kind of structure of where you put the content on your site has been so beneficial to getting people over this issue of editing and taking forever to like create the content. Just get it on the site. And since it's not easy to find, you don't need to worry about it. It's not something that even like, I actually had one customer, I don't know, they're in the cybersecurity space, so I don't know if they'd want me to mention their name, but the CMO was like so hung up, taking so long to produce content the first like 5 or 6 months of working with us. And I finally had a conversation with him and I was like, dude, what is the holdup? Like, what's going on here? And he's like, well, our board is like on me about if they see anything on our site that they don't like they're checking our website and they're like reading through it and trying to make sure that it's all legit and like in the security space that's so important. And I was like, wow, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And then I explained this strategy to him where I don't know if hiding it is the right way to say it, but to not have this content in their main navigation. And now they've published like 50 pages in the last 6 weeks because they're just putting content up there. And the whole idea here is like, no one's going to find it until they find it.
It's one way. It's one-way
Yeah.
content. The only
Yep.
way that you can come in is organic to a page like this to flow into the broader set of the website. And most people won't be able to then find their way back because it isn't included in the primary navigation. So it's exactly right, Eric. It enables to like basically segment and separate, like, this is SEO performance and its job is to funnel the right people into the website to engage with that thought leadership content, while then letting that, like, primary navigational pages maintain the crisp, clean branding, concise information that people really want to then like adhere to, and that resonates with your audience.
This is also pretty related to templates too, which can really speed things up. So if you noticed on the demand well example, that is basically a homepage template, because actually, yeah, I think it really is. I think the only thing that's customized is the title, and then the TLDR section below we customize for each page, and we kind of summarize the main points, but then everything else is pulled from a template from a version of our homepage. And then the seismic example too, it's like if you're doing an FAQ section or an enablement explainer section where all of your SEO content lives, you can have a single template that you use, like we've done with our FAQ templates also. Do you have other? Yeah, it looks like it's maybe templatized.
Yep, these all look basically the same in terms of the
Yeah.
structure. They're just changing up the H1s, H2s, adding in different content for that. And that templatizing that is huge. And to what you mentioned too about like adjusting some of these, like the TLDR, that's something that we put a lot of thought into, like what goes there. But another big aha moment, I'll stick with like the same example that I was talking in the cybersecurity space, where they're worried about, like, do we have all the right information, the right conversion, like the right CTA here? So maybe like schedule a demo isn't the right CTA, but candidly, it doesn't matter if no one's getting traffic on that. So what they're doing, like I said, 50 pages in like the last 6 weeks. And so some of those pages aren't getting any traffic. Some of them are starting to get impressions. Some of them are starting to get clicks. And that's when you can go back and optimize. So keep an eye on, like, when you're publishing those pages, you don't have to worry about the editing as much at the beginning. But once you start to notice that we're getting clicks and traffic, that's when you come back and start to work on that conversion rate optimization, start to make sure that you have all that set up properly to work well.
Yeah, 100%. Conversion rate optimization is what you do once the page is driving traffic, because some pages also might never drive traffic. And so don't waste your time. Like, you just got to get things out there.
Yep. And I'll show a couple of these other examples. So like I showed the seismic one. Another one here is Keen's Digital. So they put this specific section of their website that is dedicated to what they call CTV guides. And this helps for a lot of reasons, because they have these basically 6 categories that they've deemed as important for like the overall categories of what they do. And so it makes it super easy. They templatize this, but now every keyword that they have in their keyword strategy that's related to this one goes in that section. Everything related to that goes in that section, and they can just crank out content and put them in these different components so that it's easy to find, keeps it nice and organized. We do follow a similar one here with Lexer does playbooks and guides. So this is something that you can find under guides, but they have all this other like amazing thought leadership and other things that they're driving people to. But this is their place for, again, that more like encyclopedia type of information. Same, they call it explainers at Rossum as well. So again, just a dedicated section that they call explainers, separate from all these other types of content. And these are all tailored for specific keywords. And if you click into any of these, like they have different CTAs that, again, they start to optimize later, like once they start to get traffic. So some of them are about downloading an ebook, some of them are get a free demo or trial. So it all just depends on like how the intent of that keyword is. Like I just riffed for a while there.
No, it's fantastic. You covered a lot of great stuff. I'm just going to pull up the deck again, because we're nearing the end of our time together here today. So we've talked about outlining. Who creates it can be a pain point. Who writes it can be a pain point, and that's also, or a blocker, and that's completely dependent, in our opinion, on what the goal is of the content. If it's someone ghostwriting for your CEO, you better have a fantastic writer who can nail the brand voice, who's like, incredibly gifted in that way. If it's SEO copywriting, that's a completely different story, and you actually want an entirely different skill set. In terms of editing, again, it really depends on the goal of the content, how visible it's going to be on your website, and everything that we discussed. And then where to publish, which is, what Eric is getting into now. Again, dependent upon the goal and the intent. You can hide it in different ways. You can, if you put it in an FAQ section, for example, only people who are interested in, information will end up there. So that's really helpful as well. And then the templates can also be designed to increase your speed and align with the folders that you're keeping things in. Any last thoughts before we wrap?
Any additional questions too, feel free to ping us afterwards. We're happy to help. And something that like clearly is critical that we really didn't get into, but Demandwell really helps out with, is what information should be included on that page in the actual long form copy to ensure that it ranks well and that it speaks Google's language back to it. You can take a stab at that and just write thought leadership type information or what you believe to be like the most impactful. But really having like guardrails around that is critical to then ensure once it is produced and it does go live, it stands the best chance to then rank for the given keyword in question. So that's what the Demandwell platform kind of helps you do at scale.
Totally. Yeah, so we can help with the keyword strategy consulting through both literal consulting and also through software. And then the actual content production element as well, from outlining to writing to editing. Now that we have AI in the platform, we can do all three of those things. And then consulting on how to actually set the website up. I think that can be incredibly impactful as well. So yeah, you know where to find us. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Grady. Thank you, Eric. This was a great one. It's going to go down in history, SG Weekly history.
Thanks,
All right,
Chantal.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.